self-development is starting with the self, and you have got to take accountability. And to take accountability, you've got to bring in awareness. And so you've got to say, how is my life working right now? And if I could change something, what would I want to change? And then you've got to start processing, what are the things that I would do differently? Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Riekstins, and today we want to do something we haven't done before. Last week, we featured a dear friend of ours, Tiffany Peterson. And during the interview with Tiffany, she mentioned the conversation her and I had had a week before on her podcast. What we didn't know at the time was the incredible impact that that episode was going to have in the lives of her audience and people that listened to the episode. I mean, literally, her inbox, my inbox, we were inundated with messages from people who had just taken so much away from, as Tiffany loves to call it, a rich, meaningful conversation. So much so that I reached out to Tiffany and said, man, I would love to take that episode and back it up against the episode that we just featured of you on the Empowered Life podcast, so people get to see both sides of this incredibly rich and profound conversation. We hope that you enjoy it. More than anything, I'd really love for you to head over to the Tiffany Peterson podcast, follow, subscribe, binge watch all of her content. She's absolutely incredible. And I hope you're going to enjoy the episode that's coming up today.
Oh, friends, hello and welcome. You are in store for such a great treat and a rich conversation today. I met this gentleman earlier this year. We both spoke at an event in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I just instantly had this peace and this draw and this energy about this man's presence. And I just love what he's about. He's a very well-decorated coach and speaker, award-winning. I've seen all the different awards and Forbes and acknowledgments. I mean, this guy is a gem. And even literally before we clicked record, I'm already taking notes, and he's giving me some gems that are for my own growth and my own evolution. But all of you in this community, you're here because you're on a similar path of, I want to grow, I want to expand, I want to magnify. And so I'm so looking forward that my friend Rudi Riekstins is here today. Thank you for making the time. He has such a rich, full schedule because he's up to great work in the world and two fun young kids. And so thank you, my friend Rudi. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to be here today.
It's such a treat. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story, because you're now, I mean, you're on massive stages. You have your own thriving podcast. You get booked to work with some of the best companies and people in a coaching perspective. But can we rewind the clock a little bit and go back to, I love you talk about your high school experience at 16, and yet how it took you 20 years to get the courage, right, to step into that. And would you just give a little perspective? Because it's easy if someone goes to your social now with all your followers and this massive amount of success, it's really easy to be like, wow, and whoa, and this guy. And you're like, actually, if you know the story, I had to overcome a lot to get where I am. So I just love to presence there first and then lead into some other questions.
I love the question. And I love the value of it. And I wouldn't be serving anyone listening to this if they had a goal, a dream, or a desire that they were aspiring to have and they haven't achieved it yet, to lean in and listen very carefully to this story, because to have such a beautiful introduction, which you've given me today, and I'm so grateful for it, but it's a reminder of the journey that I'm still on. Because at 16 years old, I sat in a high school gymnasium, and a teacher invited one of the parents of one of the students to come in and speak. And he happened to be a business coach. And he walked in, and I just will never forget, pinstriped suit, blue. The guy was dressed meticulously. And the minute he took that stage, it was like every student left the room. The lights went out. The teachers left the stage. It was just him and it was me. It was him and it was me. I felt like I had this tap on my shoulder, and God said to me, tap, 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 like, this is what you're going to do with your life. Pay attention. I remember, and I'm sure it happened many times before, but in that moment, it was the first time I ever remember having my entire body electrified. Like every hair was standing on my body at attention. I had that feeling like I'd stepped out of my body, and I just knew this is a glimpse of your future. And it was the most incredible experience. And he left the stage 40, 45 minutes later, and all the kids came back in the room, and all the teachers came back on stage. Now, obviously, they'd been there the entire time, but my awareness to everybody came back. And I turned to people around me and I was like, oh my God, that was amazing. Wasn't that sensational? And everybody else was just bored and wanted to go and kick a soccer ball outside. And they didn't have the moment I had. And I left thinking, wow, I know what I'm going to do with my life. But my story doesn't start in that room at 16 years old, knowing what my journey is. My story starts at 6 years old when I went to my first grade of school. And the teacher called me stupid as I walked into the classroom. And she actually recognized me because she said, "Hey, you related to," and then she mentioned my older brother's name. And I said, "Yes, yes, I am." And at that point, I was already nervous because it's my first day of school. It was a very military styled school. It was school uniforms and blazers and just very different than my life had looked up until that point. And then she said, "Well, if you're anything like your brother, you'll spend the whole year in the dunce's chair. That's where the stupid kids sit." And then she put a dunce's hat on my head and actually had the words dunce written on them. And then explained to me that dunce meant stupid. And I now sat on a bar stool with all the other kids sitting in regular school desks. And the look of every kid's face, the terror in their faces, looking at me like, I don't want to be that guy. And me looking at them saying, "Oh, that's what it looks like to be looked at like you're stupid." And I had that realization of I'm stupid. And the only reason I share this story is because I believed I wasn't good enough. I believed I wasn't worthy. I believed I was, in fact, stupid. And so from that day moving forward for the rest of my high school career, I never applied myself. I never tried. I was the class clown. I was the joker. I was always trying to be what somebody else wanted me to be, not who I wanted to be. And so at 16 years old, when I'm sitting in this room and I hear this man speak and moving the room and the energy in the room and exciting people and speaking and breathing life into me, I was like, that's what I want to do. But you see, the very next thought I had was, yeah, but you're dumb and you're never
Mm,
going to be anything. And
mm,
who's ever going to listen to you? And that was the wording going on in my head. And so I left that room more defeated than I went in. And it took me 20 more years for me to build the courage and the confidence to be able to do that. Now, fast forward 10 years from when I was in that room, I had eventually met my wife, then we got married. And in my early 30s, I'll never forget my wife and I talking about what we wanted to do with our lives and where we wanted to go. And from the very beginning, we've been two souls very aligned in supporting each other in the development of our futures. And I said to her, I want to speak on stages. My goal is to be on stage in front of 85,000 people. I want to do
mm,
this 40 weeks a year and I want to do this until I'm 103. Like, that's my life mission. And I remember her saying, like, why don't you start now? And I was like, oh no, I first need to make money. I first need to have businesses. I need to have some value for people to be able to believe me, for somebody to
mm,
listen to the words that I have. And so it took me 20 years from 16 to 36 before I took my first stage, before I spoke in front of an audience,
mm,
giving what I believed could support and grow and develop people. And I share that. And I'm so glad you asked the question because people can go onto your social media and see how hugely successful you are, the thousands and thousands of people's lives that you change every day. But what they don't see is what did it take to get you
mm,
there? What are the thoughts that go on over and over in your mind? But here's what I think is more powerful than the initial question. I'm 45. I do speak on stages. I do work with some of the biggest and most incredible companies in the world. I still wake up every day thinking I'm stupid. And it's that thought of like, oh, someone called me stupid or someone said I'm not good enough. And it's
mm,
not that those thoughts stop. It's how long do you allow those thoughts to control you? How long do you allow the reaction to be there? Because I had to film something this morning and it was a request that somebody had sent me and I quickly needed to do something so we could send off a promo. And my very first thought was, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Oh, I don't have what that they need for this thing. And that was the very first thought. And then I laughed and I was because I remembered the pattern and I was like, of course I can. Like, why couldn't I? And then I did it. And within 2, 3 minutes, I had it done, sent off, and it was exactly what was needed. And we've moved on. And then the very next thing happened and we just keep going. But for 20 years, I allowed that first thought to stop me. I allowed that first thought to control me. I allowed that first thought to be molasses and not allow me to take steps to move forward. So again, I'm going to bring it back to the audience. If you have a goal, a dream, a desire, you've got something on your heart that you want to have, be, do, and achieve, and there's something that stops you, your responsibility is not to let that thing stop you. It's to ask, why is it there? And when you identify why is it there, then you can move forward. Because I had a beautiful lesson of knowing what it feels like for 20 years to know who I am and what I meant to do, but not believe in myself to do it. Now I have almost 10 years of taking committed action every day. I know what it looks like to be able to support and develop and grow people and to lead my life with true fulfillment, joy, and purpose. But I also know what the cost was of waiting 20 years.
mm,
And the value of what I gained in those 20 years is what I teach today. and I wouldn't have been able to teach it if I hadn't had it. And
Mm.
so there's always in every moment just such an incredible blessing.
My gosh, this is so rich. This is gold, Rudy. Like gold. And there's something we really need to like just circle back to and like put a solid pin in for everyone listening and for myself is one of the things, this truth bomb you just laid out for us is even with all the success you've now created, you still have the negative thoughts come up. Because where I think so often the temptation is we're going to we'll finally take the action. We'll finally click publish. We'll finally put ourselves out there. We'll do the thing once we feel like we're perfectly confident. And it's like, well, I'm still having negative thoughts or self-doubt pop up. So I've got to be perfectly healed. Then I'll take the action. And what you just normalized is you still today, in the time of this recording, that was your first thought. And it's like, I had a show years back we recorded called The Weeds Always Return. Natural law of the earth is the weeds come back. You don't have to water them, try to fertilize them. Oh, come on, weeds grow, right? Like I've got tomatoes in the backyard and cucumbers and gorgeous flowers. They require intention, but the weeds never require it. And they do come back and they are there. But rather than what you've modeled, than stopping you, is that you're like, yeah, that's still going to pop up. Even when you're this Mr. Success coach and you've done all this work, you still have it come up. It's just that you've now practiced another mindset, practice neural pathways. You've practiced. I really want you to drop in here in a moment and talk about priming and how you coach people to do that because there's so much value there. But thank you for normalizing that because wouldn't you agree that all too often we're waiting to feel perfectly confident before we'll take the action? And what you just said is, hey, those thoughts are still coming in the midst of even a successful, quote, life and business. And it's what you do after the thought, after the weed pops up. It's like, oh, well, I guess I just can't. Instead of, wait, no, my chosen response is, and my chosen belief is, and my chosen self is going to choose this instead of that thought.
The most important thing that any one of us can ever do to live the most abundant, joyful, free life that we can have, which I believe every single person has access to, is to have awareness. The awareness is to pay attention to what are the thoughts and the feelings that you're having, because your thoughts control your feelings. Your thoughts and feelings drive all of your behavior. When I have a thought that says, Rudi, you're not good enough. Rudi, you're unworthy. Rudi, who's going to listen to you? What credibility do you have? How could you charge those rates? Who's ever going to pay you that? How could you speak on stage next to that person? What value are you going to add when all these thoughts that come, they happen and they're always going to happen because you have a neurological pathway that you so eloquently pointed out that every single person has a formulated pattern. That pattern was given to them at a time when they couldn't choose it. And what I mean by that is under the age of 7, every single person takes all information as a fact. So somebody tells you the sky is blue and you say, yes, the sky is blue. My father used to say, money doesn't grow on trees. And so I took that as a fact. Money doesn't grow on trees. It's really hard to come by. That was something I heard all the time. I also heard, well, the Riekstins struggle. That was another thing I always heard. And it always has to be difficult for me, like those repetitive statements over and over. And so as a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old boy, I would find myself repeating the statements my dad would say, like, oh, everything is always a struggle for me. I would be doing anything and I would find the struggle in it because, well, that's what I learned. So that just becomes a pattern or a behavior that we've adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's a teacher calling you stupid. Sometimes it's a friend that stops talking to you, or a kid steals your lunch or your money on the bus. Whatever the situation is, and you process that, you fire a thought. That thought then sends an impulse in the brain, and that creates a pathway that says when something like that happens, that's how you're going to feel. Then it automates that process, and now it looks for more information to validate that that's a thought and that's the reaction. The human brain is so incredible. It's so complex, but yet so simple. So it creates efficiencies in everything. So at one point in time, a teacher called me stupid, and I felt the feelings of what would somebody that feels stupid feel like. Well, that's unworthy. It's not enough. And the I can't do it. And it's the debilitating feeling. It's the nervousness. It's the anxiousness. It's the anxiety. And so anytime someone offers me an opportunity to do something, my immediate reaction, that impulse that I get, is firing that neurological pathway that says, don't put your hand up, because at some point in time in your life, you put your hand up to do something or to say something and you
Yeah.
were called stupid, not enough. And so that's terrible. That's painful. So we don't want to feel that. We want to feel safe. So
Mhm,
let's just not do that because we know how that's going to feel. And
mhm,
so it sends the chemical into the body. So the brain is dumping an impulse. Limbic brain produces a chemical, which is the equivalent of the emotion that you're feeling, which is just an interpretation of the information you just had, dumps into the body, and you feel unworthy. So if I get a message this morning that says, "Hey, Rudy, I need you to do this thing. It's going to take you a couple of minutes. I need you to film this." And that immediate thought is, "Oh, I can't do that." I have to catch the thought. So there's the awareness. And then the second thought is that even true? Is it true that I can't do that? Is it true that I'm not prepared or qualified or that would be hard or I shouldn't be the one to do it? And I'm like, well, no, actually, that's not true. And in that moment, I've gone from the awareness to the emotion to being conscious. And being conscious is an intentional act where I am now thinking about what was I reacting to a moment ago. And then I decide, how do I want to react to that? And so, a process that I teach inside of organizations, I do this with individuals and entire companies, is to prime your brain so that you can recreate how does your brain react to situations and circumstances. I
mhm.
significantly less today show up feeling insecure, unworthy, not enough because I've stacked so much evidence of when I do something, I'm going to do it well, or when I do something, it'll be received well, or when I work hard, I reap the rewards. But when they come up, I know how to react to them. And most people, they are still living the default pattern of the thoughts that were given to them, the chemical instructions given to them when their brains didn't have the ability to process logical or rational thought. And so, if a brain that is still developing under the age of 7 doesn't think in logical reason and it absorbs all information as a fact, and you grew up in a home where people told you you could do anything and everything, you're going to be somebody with a growth mindset. You're going to go out and you're going to want to have, be, do, and achieve. But if somebody told you you can't have and you're not good enough and you're not worthy and then demonstrated that to you somehow, then your brain looks for information to validate that. And what you need to do is take control, bringing awareness, and then consciously choosing how do you want to think, how do you want to feel, because that's going to automatically, impact all of the behaviors that you take. Most people try and change behavior, but you cannot change
Mhm,
behavior, at least not consistently. But if you change a
mhm,
thought, it's going to automatically change the
mhm.
feeling, which is the
Oh my
feeling
gosh.
is just the chemical. Yeah.
Right. Like, I think even though you're so familiar with this work and it's work we're both in a lot, like, just the reminder, y'all, to be in what he just said is how often we're like, we already know, like, for instance, to be healthy, right? We all have that in common as whoever is listening, no matter their age, their gender, their religion, their political affiliation, their business, their industry, where they live on the planet. We all are in a body, and health is part of our journey. And if we were to say, what do I need to do to be healthy and in shape? We could list off behaviors. What you just said, though, is back to such the powerful, literal, formative influence, which is, but what are the thoughts? How do I see myself, right? We're talking about identity, something I heard last night and I listened to it. I rewound it 3 different times. I was listening to this sermon and then I literally wrote about it today is that your identity is your destiny, right? And you think about like what you're bringing us home to is such richness. This is golden, my friend. Thank you so much because again, it's like the thoughts and the identity and like you're saying the belief and sometimes that young schoolboy is still running the show initially who believes, oh, I was told I was stupid, or hearing your dad's voice, hey, well, things are just rough for us, or we don't have that kind of money, or we're not that, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, no, my chosen self, who again, let's go deeper in priming, but thank you for bringing us home to that because a lot of times, right, like if any of you get frustrated, I'm sure you do because this is a human thing, where you may have bought all kinds of courses over the years, or read law books, or even listened to lots of podcasts and you get really hyped up and motivated. I call it hopium, Rudy, right? You get into an audience, right? Like a workshop, a stage, a seminar, and we get on the hopium high. I love a hopium high. I'm not going to lie. Give me some good juice, right? Like we're jazzed. And then it's like we get the deflated or we're like, oh, I'm not moving forward or I'm not taking the action. Cause a lot of times it's not that you're lacking knowledge. You still haven't synced up yet the thought belief, right? To do I see myself as this? Do I have the identity of a man on a stage, inspiring or holding a room or writing that book or taking that trip or meeting that person? So thank you for that truth bomb, because it's like, oh man, that's the bigger work I've been doing in my own life on lots of levels, is like next levels, is really, like I was saying before we click record, I'm really pretty comfy in a lot of levels of what I've created, but it's not about comfort. And a lot of people, oh, you've created a lot of success, but I'm after a growth edge. And in my own personal journey, I've really transformed my relationship with fitness in the last 2 or 3 years. Very different than my previous, 40, where it's like, wow. And a lot of that, again, is yes, I've changed behavior, but the behavior's been following changing my mindset and my seeing myself as that person. So, anyway, I know I just went off a long wrong little tirade on that, but it's so important because, again, what you just brought us home to is everyone likely knows most of, maybe not all. There are sometimes we're learning a specific skill or a tool, but most of the changes we're needing to make in our lives, we already know what to do. We're not lacking knowledge. We're lacking belief, confidence, clarity, am I enoughness? And we're often waiting for a feeling. Like you said, thoughts create the feelings. So you're really not waiting for even a feeling. You're waiting for your thoughts to get in alignment. Anyway, take us next, dear one, because this is so good.
I want to just put a pin, as you so beautifully said earlier, into something you said. And if your audience only hears this and they end the conversation with what you just said, they're going to take more than they could learn in anything else. You have to stop seeing you the way that you used to be so you can become who you want to be. Now, I've changed the context of what you said, but I want to be laser clear here. If you are somebody that is struggling with health and you're listening to this episode and you want to lose weight or you want to build muscle or you want to get over a debilitating illness and you see yourself as sick or overweight or unhealthy, or I can't grow muscle, or you're looking at yourself like I can't be an author, or I'm never going to get this done, or who's going to listen to me, then that's where you're anchoring yourself. So often when people want to lose weight and they do all the diets, but the weight stays on, they work out feverishly, but the weight stays on. It's because they still see themselves as a fat person. They still see the weight. And so they cannot lose the weight. And if you can look at yourself and see yourself as healthy, beautiful, powerful, benevolent, you see yourself in the size, the shape that you want to be, or in the loving, committed relationship you want to be, or you see yourself as somebody who is respected, appreciated, valued, whatever the thing is you're wanting, you have to be the one to see that first. And if you don't see that in you, you're not going to allow other people to see that in you. A process I take into organizations is called priming. And we've touched on and alluded to it throughout this episode, but I want to give it to you today because I really want to be able to serve whoever's listening to this. Priming is by far one of the most successful things that I can bring into somebody's life or business. Every single morning, every single person on the planet wakes up. Every single person has their version of what it is that they do each and every single day. And 95% of who you are as you listen to this episode is all unconscious. It means it's a program. It means you are reacting.
Yeah.
Every thought, every feeling, every behavior, what you do when you wake up, the cup of coffee that you grab, the number of sugar cubes you put in or don't put in, whether you add your half and half, the amount of half and half, everything that you're doing, 95% of what you do is pre-programmed. That's not limited to the actions you take, like going to pee, brushing your teeth, showering, going to work out. That's also inclusive of how do you talk to people? How do you talk to yourself in your own mind, in your own thoughts? How do you react or respond to situations or circumstances? All of that is a pre-programmed, preconditioned, because I alluded to earlier, the brain is really complicated, but it's really simple. And it has created efficiencies around every scenario of how you think, how you feel, and how you respond. So when somebody asks you to do something and your immediate default is, oh, that could be painful, and you shut down, then your palms get sweaty, your knees get weak, you back out, you say, no, thank you, I can't, I shouldn't, and you self-sabotage. That wasn't you that self-sabotaged. If you were in a state of calm, you were in a state of joy, you were in a state of bliss, and you were consciously aware of what was happening in your life in that moment, then you would say, oh, of course I would have done that. Why didn't I say that at the time? Or let's give a better example that everyone can resonate with. When you go into work and you talk to that person that you don't like and you have an argument and then you can't find the words that you want to say and then they leave the meeting And then you sit there and you stew on it for an hour, 2 hours, and then you're like, why couldn't I say this? Why couldn't I have just said that? And you are frustrated with yourself because you couldn't find the words. It's because you, in that moment, were running a default program. You weren't responsible for what you were actually saying and doing. You were reacting or responding. I believe there's two ways to live life. You can live your life intentionally, purposefully, carefully, calculatedly, choosing who do you want to be? How do you want to feel? And then what do you want to do with your life? And then you get to meet those commitments every single day. That's an action, it's an act, it's an intention, meaning I'm going to be this way, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to feel this way. And then you are met with success again and again and again. Or you can do what the majority of the population does, which is wake up every single day, repeat how we lived yesterday, how we felt yesterday. We're a duplication of who we were. We're not who we are right now. And the brain is perfectly equipped to remind you of exactly who you used to be, which is why yesterday looks like the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that. And tomorrow is going to be exactly the same unless you become the catalyst to create the change. Self development is starting with the self, and you have got to take accountability. And to take accountability, you've got to bring in awareness. And so you've got to say, how is my life working right now? And if I could change something, what would I want to change? And then you've got to start processing what are the things that I would do differently. So if you wanted to write a book, or you wanted to be in a better relationship, or you wanted to lose weight, or whatever the thing is that's sitting on your heart, there's something that's held you back from being able to do that. And that's based on a pattern or a behavior. We don't have to go into what's the pattern or the behavior to be able to fix it. We just have to be able to change what we're going to do next. And so the process of priming that I teach is that when somebody wakes up, it's to purposefully, very carefully, and calculatedly decide how are we going to spend the first 20 minutes of our day. I don't mind if you wake up at 4 a.m. like I do. You could wake up at 6 a.m. You could wake up at 10 a.m. But whatever you do in the first 20 minutes of when you wake up, your brain is the most susceptible to change. And I support you in what you do in the first 20 minutes is going to set a dominant vibrational state. So it's going to stick a pin in the emotion that you most feel inside of the first 20 minutes of your day. There are very specific things that you can do, steps you can take to optimize your mind to be more courageous, to be more confident, to be more brave, to take more action. You can also optimize your emotions to be powerful, to be abundant, to be joyful, to be loving, to be expressive, to be divine, and then put a pin in that. And then when you step forward into your day, you're going to feel that way the rest of your day. So now, if a bird poops on your shoulder, or you get a flat tire, or they spell your name wrong on your Starbucks cup of coffee, you don't immediately feel that somebody's disrespected you, or that life sucks, or bad things always happen to you, because your dominant state's so high, it's so connected to the beauty of all of life that you make very different decisions. You feel very different emotions. So you take very different actions. And that's the act of priming yourself for success every single day. So the simple formula is this. When you wake up in the morning, do not speak to anybody, because the minute you talk to somebody in the first few minutes, you're opening yourself to the influence of whatever their agenda is. You need to fill your cup first. We've all heard that. But to do that means you've got to go somewhere where you can be uninterrupted. I've got two small kids, so I wake up at 4 o'clock because they wake up at 6 o'clock. And I want enough time that I can pour into me. So I'll go and sit somewhere. I sit in my office, the same couch, same place every single day. There isn't a question. I sit there, I sit with a cup of coffee, I sip the coffee a little bit, I do some deep breaths, I drink a tremendous amount of water. I do 18 to 22 ounces of water the minute I wake up so that I start to hydrate the brain, and then I start to oxygenate the blood. So now my brain's really working in those first 20 minutes. And then I go into a deep state of being still. You can call it meditation, you can call it mindfulness, you can call it deep breathing, but I take in really deep breaths. And then as I breathe out, I imagine all stress, fear, and anxiety leaving my body. And I become really calm, really still, really sound of mind. And in that moment, I'm Rudi, outside of emotion. I'm not thinking about what has to happen. I'm not thinking about my meetings. I'm not thinking about my kids, my wife, my life, my bank account. I'm just 100% calm. And that process takes minutes. In the beginning, it's going to take you longer to practice. But when you get proficient at it, it's going to take you 2-3 minutes just to be very still, very calm, very centered. Then I imagine what I want my life to look like and feel like. I'm going to use a word that is very touchy, but I want you to come with me on the entirety of the journey. I want you, once you found that very calm, centered point, void of emotion, to fantasize about your ultimate life. Every single person, every adult has had a sexual fantasy. And a sexual fantasy is a thought with imagery in your mind that moves the physical body, makes blood pump, and you get sweaty palms, and there's a physical reaction to something that happened in your mind, but it isn't physically happening in real life. I
Mhm.
want people in the first 20 minutes of their day to fantasize a vision of their future, standing on stage in front of 85,000 people, writing that book, being that ideal relationship, ideal body weight, having the business, the bank account, the whatever. Fantasize about that life with so much intensity, with so much color, with so much clarity, with so much conviction that your body alters itself the same way it would in a sexual fantasy. So you fantasize about the life that you want.
Mm.
And then you feel what that feels like. I can talk to you for hours on the scientific data that backs up that at the end of a meditation, if you were being scanned by an EKG machine, that your body would no longer match the body that sat down. You would be two different people when you got up because you've changed the physical body. But you need to do that with intensity. And so, how long you have to sit there to get to that point, that's
Mm.
up to you. But I will imagine everything that's coming up in my day. I will think about this podcast interview. I will think about this client call that I'm having. If I'm going into a sales call and I'm hoping it's a yes, I imagine it's a yes. I imagine us high-fiving and them
Mm.
paying me and how abundant I am and what it feels like to be seen and valued and heard and appreciated. Then I walk out on stage and I'm in front of 85,000 people. I'm 103 years old and I'm still got I'm excited and the audience is,
Yes.
and now I'm primed because now my body has matched that state. And now
Mhm.
here's the thing I want everybody to know. Now I send that energy, that feeling, that intensity, that love, that joy, that emotion of what I have, and I send it forward as if I'm paving a yellow brick road.
Mm.
Then I open my eyes. And now my body has physically experienced the end result of my greatest manifestation. So I physically feel like I've already achieved it. And if I've achieved it in my mind, the only thing that hasn't been there yet is the physical Rudi walking in there, but his body's experienced it. And so now I will make decisions from a very different part of my brain that match those results. So if you called me and said, Rudi, oh my gosh, I need something in 2 minutes. Can you meet this deadline? I'd be like, hell yeah, I can. Because this morning I was in alignment with me living my highest and greatest potential. And then the last part of this exercise is I write down affirming statements that reinforce things that I've already done that meet and match that end result. And then I bring in new ones. And they always start with I am. And then I intersperse grateful for or have achieved so that I'm using the two most powerful words in the English language because we all know I am, what follows those two words define you. If you say, I am tired, I am sick, I am frustrated, you create that physiological shift in your body of tired, sick, frustrated. I want people to realize this. Every thought plus every spoken word out of your mouth is casting a spell. It is truly
Mm.
declaring and putting a stake in the sand of what you want next. And so if you walk around all day long saying, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, I'm a victim, or I feel like a victim, then you're forecasting, I want more of that. But if you can start the first 20 minutes of your day when your brain is looking for who do you want to be, not who were you? Because if you don't do this, the brain's just going to remind itself of who you were and it's
Yeah.
going to feel the way you felt. So it's going to make
For sure.
decisions that you always made. And this is how you create that shift. Ending it with I am abundant, I am powerful, and then I look at all the things I've done to reaffirm that this is true and it's not fiction. And that starts to create that shift. Then you stack success in your day, all day, every day of every time you do it, that you're met with success. And it is life changing,
Mm.
literally life changing.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. And I just love that visual of the yellow brick road. And what you just said as well is there's a great book by Florence Shin. She was alive in the 30s and 40s and speaking and teaching on metaphysics. And she has a book called Your Word is Your Wand. And so when you say that language, like you're literally casting a spell on your life is, that languaging. I love also there's a quote by Hafiz where it says that the words you speak, right, becomes the house you live in. And thank you for just bringing us home to these truths. And even like I could visually see you sitting on your couch in your office, sipping that cup of coffee. I love you're that clear. Like, this is how my morning begins. And I love other things I've listened to where you talk about don't touch your phone first thing, right? Don't interact, even like you and your wife, as you mentioned before. I've heard you talk about, if whichever one of you wakes up first will kind of sneak out of the bed and go do their thing, and you guys go get aligned first before you even often connect. And I love like the clarity of, and wherever y'all want to take this and apply it, but the principle is so rich and so true, which is begin your day with intention, begin your day seeing yourself, right? I even love to do this because I'm with you, like some of these big goals, big dreams, but even, of course, like the little things, like seeing how you're going to show up with your kids. Or I'll do this a lot with my sweetheart, where as I'm transitioning, coming into the house, or meeting him somewhere and I've been in work mode or some focus, like I get intentional and I see myself in my mind's eye, like how my energy feels, how I show up with him and for him, that I'm an intentional person, the way I show up in that partnership. And so I just love the reminder to use our minds more intentionally, right? Because our minds are always working, but often, to your exact point, love, is what you've so beautifully taught us today, is our minds will often just repeat what's familiar or the subconscious, and just like whatever the story is. And sometimes we get in the most trouble because we believe the thoughts that the mind pumps out, right? And they're just thoughts, they're not truth, but they're powerful. And so coming home to these truths of like, wow, this is so good, so rich. There's one question I want to ask, and it kind of takes you back to, I want to know about that very first speaking gig at age 36. How did you feel getting on that stage? And secondly, I'm just so curious, what do you remember what you talked about, what your topic was?
So I've never spoken about this publicly before. My very
Oh,
first
we're the
speech,
first?
yes, actually,
Yay! Here we
your
are, you
question,
guys.
your question was very, very specific. And so you want to know about the first time I spoke. And the first time I spoke wasn't on a stage. The first time I spoke publicly was in my living room of my house.
Hmm.
And my wife went onto a platform called Meetup. I don't know if it's still around these days, but she went to meetup.com and she just posted that I would be speaking and the topic I'd be speaking on, and then invited absolute strangers to show up to my house on a Thursday night, and then told me shortly before, oh, you're speaking and this is what's happening. Because
I
I
love
couldn't,
your wife. I can't wait to meet her.
she is amazing, and has definitely been the catalyst in my life for so many reasons. And so she just invited strangers to her house. And I remember having that thought of, you did what? Like, WTF? Like,
Like
how could you
freaking
do this
out.
to me? And so strangers showed up in my house. And then there I was. There was nothing I could do. It was now, P, you get off the pot. And here's the beautiful thing
I
about what
love
you
this
just,
so much. Like,
so
Rudy,
here's
this is
what's amazing.
perfect.
One of the ladies that shows up in my living room, sits there very quietly. We speak 2.5 hours. We end the evening, and I open the room to questions. And the lady asks a question, and it was related to God. And I thought it was odd because we weren't really talking about God specifically in the event, but she had a very specific question. And she wanted to know what were my thoughts and feelings on my belief of what God thinks about somebody who ends their life.
Oh my goodness.
And we then had a discussion, and then she stayed behind as everybody left, and she said that she had made the decision to end her life. And then she saw that meetup and she thought, I will just go and see if there's something there for me. And we hosted 56 live events in our house every 2 weeks over a 2 year period, and she attended every single one of those meetings. She is still beautifully, happily living her life today, and she credits that night for saving her. And here's what I want people to think about. She sat in that room and told everybody that that's what she was going to do, and that she had decided not to because she'd heard something that she thought she could tap into and give her the courage to stay. But here's what's so beautiful about your question is that first time I ever spoke wasn't on a big fancy stage. And I had done that before in my career, but I'd done it selling a product for a company. I'd never done it as Rudi, who is the product, if you will, the speaker, the
Yeah, the
person that has to have
teacher.
the value. And I was petrified. And at 7 p.m., people started walking into my house, and I just wanted to run. I wanted to hide. And I didn't run and I didn't hide. And I fumbled through it and I didn't feel confident. And I did the best I could. But Tiffany, your question's so powerful because if I hadn't done that, what would have happened to that lady? And how differently could life have been had I not taken that action in that moment? Had my wife not forced me to do it, and then had I not had the courage to go through with it? And that's what actually drives so much of who I am today, because I now carry with me the weight of what does it feel like to have lived for 20 years not doing that?
Mm,
And how many people like that lady came into my orbit, came into my life, but I didn't show up. And now when I walk into a room, I'm on a stage, I'm in a meeting, I'm on a podcast, I'm standing in a grocery line. It doesn't matter where I am. I'm 100% present. I'm 100% accountable. I am making sure that I am impacting people in every environment. I am the forever teacher. I am the forever student. I am the forever present. And I'm always wanting to grow and support and develop people because you never know what somebody needs. You never know what you have to offer could be the solution. And you don't know what somebody else's experience is and your responsibility until after it's passed. So
mm,
you have to meet every single moment as if
mhm,
someone's life depends on it, because the thing is, your life depends on it. The quality of your life is
mm,
dependent on how you show up. But then also, you make an impact, and you know this because you do this every day. Every time you speak to people, coach, support, stand on stage, sell a book, sell a course, sell a program, speak to an audience, you're moving people. But if you're not aware, like you are, as you mentioned with your sweetheart, and how you show up to him before you meet him, and how you see it when you are not present and aware before you talk to somebody in a grocery line, or before you talk to somebody on stage or on a coaching call or in any environment, you need to do it like every single moment that you're with that person. It is the single most important
mm,
defining moment, because it
mm.
is. You're having the moment and you have to be present to it. Otherwise, you're going to miss it.
Rudy, I love this so much. You really haven't shared that before publicly.
No.
This is it. You guys, like, because here's the cool thing is just honor your intuition because you started to, you shared that a while back as we were recording and connecting and talking about 36 and did my first speaking engagement and whatnot. And it was like, then I just kept getting this nudge, right? Like how you got tapped at 16 in that gym, listening to that speaker. It just was like, ask him about this, ask him about this. So I just trust someone listening or several someone's listening to this needed to hear that because I'm like, wow, the emotion of that and the power of that, the reminder is, and there's several lessons in that. One is the willingness to begin, right? Before it's all polished, perfect presentation. You didn't have a slide deck. I also love the power of our relationships and who you associate with. And your wife's a freaking boss in the best way. Like I freaking love her already, right? Because she's like, I see my person, I see his gifts, and we're gonna light the fire. Just invite all these strangers to our house and here we go. But also to your point is the willingness to follow your draw and your calling and what you feel passionate about. You just never know whether that's art, whether that's doing hair or aesthetics or it's health and wellness or you want to speak and coach like Rudy's talking about is whatever you're drawn to, you just never know how that's going to create a connection or expansion for someone else as well as how it expands you, right? Like you became a different person that night as well, right? Like because you were willing to, you could have hid and run. You could have been like, well, that's it. I'm getting in the car and I'm going to go drive to the park and sweetheart, you'll have to handle these guests in our home. You could have chosen that, right? Like you said, your first thought was, I want to run. I want to get out of here. Um,
I
so,
want to
so
ground
many life lessons in that, you know?
I want to ground this in another example that is so applicable to life, and just how in every moment we get to show up as the best version of ourselves, or we get to react as the person that we used to be that we might not necessarily be proud of. A friend of mine owns a business, and he offers like paddle boarding lessons, and he rents paddle boards and kayaks, and he's hugely successful because it's a very profitable business. But the people that are working there are just college kids, and they come in and they come out. They're there for a season, they're there for a week or two. So they're not committed to his business. They're just there for a paycheck, and it's summer and it's a coastal town, and they love being in their bathing suits for their job. But he brought me in because, they were having a problem with how they were handling customer service, and he wanted to kick his summer off and have his team motivated. And he said, would you do me a favor and just come to my house? I've got this barbecue. Will you talk to my people? And so I show up, and there's like 40 college kids sitting there. And we did a 30, 40 minute, chat standing around a fire. And halfway through the summer, one of the people that were there grabbed me when they saw me and said, I just want to share with you an experience that we had and how you left us after you had spoken to us. And I spoke to them about how every moment you get to show up, and you always have to be considerate about what somebody else is doing or thinking or feeling. And I tied it into his business, saying, when somebody shows up here, they're showing up at the beach, they want to rent some kayaks and paddleboards. And to you, you just think it's a paddleboard and it's a kayak and pay me $40 and then get it and come back in an hour. And to you, it's very mechanical. What if that is the single highlight of their entire week vacation, and it's the only week vacation they have? And what
Mm,
if you are the one reason that either makes or breaks that vacation for them,
mm,
because it's another reminder that they're not good enough or they're not respected? And you have a moment where you can support people. And this young kid overheard this and then sat with it. And fast forward a month or two later, halfway through the season, a very difficult customer was working with them, and she wanted to phone the police. She was upset. She was causing a scene, and everybody had pretty much written her off. And this young kid heard those words and then left where they were, went and found this lady as she was getting in a car to drive out, and stopped and just said, hey, I just want to say I'm sorry. We just reacted. It's been a long day. We're sitting in the sun. And at no point in time did I ask you, what are you going through? And they started having a real conversation. That lady showed up almost every single day for the rest of the summer and dropped off boxes of pizza, dropped off beers for the people
mm,
that could drink beers, dropped off sodas. She became their biggest cheerleader and champion because someone took the time to give them some compassion, some love, some kindness. And here's the beautiful thing: my friend's business never generated more money than he did that summer. And it was nothing to do with increased people coming in. It was people wanted to stay. And so they stayed longer. They were extended because it felt good. They wanted to be in proximity. And that's the beauty of what we're talking about: is it doesn't matter what job you are in or where you're going or what you're doing, you're interacting with people. And we just need
mhm,
to remember we're people first and foremost. And not everybody started their day off priming. Not everybody's read the books. Not everybody's taken the courses, but we get to, through our life and through our expression, show up as the best version. And I think that's the best way for us to be able to teach and create an impact in people's lives, is to demonstrate it.
mm. Rudy, I'm just feeling so grateful for you in this conversation. Thank you for saying yes to your purpose. And thank you for leaning in, even when it's hard and scary. And even the days today in real time, it still is, right? And the moments and the stretches, because I just feel myself personally so blessed by this conversation and so filled up. And I just know so many people listening to this are also blessed by this. If this also touched you, I invite you to slide into Rudy's DMs on the Instagram and let him know that, right? Or some way. What is your Instagram handle so people can find you there and follow you there?
So it is at Rudi Riekstins, which is RudiRiekstins, at Rudi Riekstins, or just rudyriekstins.com.
Okay. We'll link all of that in the show notes too, so you guys can have just an easy link. Go click it, follow him, get connected. But thank you, my friend. This has been such a rich conversation. I've taken several notes for my own growth and focus and what I want to see evolve and expand in my own life. So thank you. Like again, I just feel so blessed and so touched by everything you've said. I feel like I'm just like, oh man, this has been such a blessing. Thank you for sharing the time. Is there a final thought or quote or anything that's on your heart you want to share to wrap us up and complete us for today?
I have two things. First, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, for your love, for your energy, for creating this platform, for inviting me to even just have a sliver of your time to be able to share a little bit of my life experience. And then I want to remind everybody that their life experience is perfectly preparing them for who they get to be next. And we get to react to who we're going to be, or we get to intentionally create the life that we want to have so we can be who we came here to be, because everyone came here with something very unique that they have to do. And only when you do that does the world get to benefit from you. And that's what I want to do, is remind people: don't spend 20 years not doing what you should be doing. I know what it feels like every day to wake up and live my life. I know what it feels like to live my purpose. I know what it feels like to be Rudy in his truest form. And I have the most joy and fulfillment and freedom in my life today than I've ever had. But at some point in time, I had to make a decision and then I had to take an action. And we've given you a formula today. Between our conversation, there's been so much value that's gone back and forth, but the only value in it is the action if you do something with it. And so otherwise, the information has no value. If anyone wants to, I have a book on my website. I'll give it to them for free. And it's Reset Your Mind, Reset Your Life. And it speaks into the
Mm,
process of priming. And I would love for them to download the book and they can grab a copy, or they can just go through and listen to the process of what we broke down. It's simple, but I just know the value and the power for it. And I would love to hear from anyone who has heard something that resonated with them today. And I appreciate you so much, Tiffany. Thank you,
mm.
thank you, thank you.
Oh, I love this. And I look forward to so many fun future connections for us as well. So, my friend, thank you. And all of y'all, as he said, I would go absolutely download that book, begin that. I'll be hopping over there myself. Follow him on Instagram, get connected. And my friend, I look forward to staying connected to you and for the, again, great future memories we'll be making as well.